Hey guys, Miss Caruso here. I just wanted to go ahead and get started with reading chapter 10, The Neverbird. We left off chapter 9 where Peter and Hook were fighting, and Peter gets clawed by Hook, who was fighting pretty unfairly, and Peter was very surprised by that, and that's how Hook got his jab in. We are left with the Lost Boys, Peter, Wendy. They all seem to have gone separate ways, and that's what brings us to chapter 10. And Hook and the pirates have gone back to the pirate ship because they heard the tick-tock of the croc. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The Neverbird. And remember, the Neverbird is that bird whose nest fell into the water and is very maternal, and went ahead and followed her nest into the water and started just keeping her eggs warm there. Out on the water, the Lost Boys had won their fight with Smee and Starkey, but they couldn't find Peter or Wendy or Hook. Taking the pirate's dinghy, they sailed home in it, shouting for Peter and Wendy the entire time. Peter, Wendy! But there was no response except for an occasional mocking from the mermaids. They must be swimming or flying back, the boys concluded. Had they stayed in the lagoon, they might have soon heard two voices crying for help. Peter and Wendy, he injured and she weak, had climbed onto Marooner's Rock. As the water rose dangerously from them, they fell unconscious, one right after the other. Now, what does that mean, unconscious? If you're thinking it means to go ahead and fall asleep or to go ahead and kind of not be able to stay awake, you are correct. A mischievous mermaid pulled Wendy by her toe, trying to get her into the water. Feeling her slip from him, Peter woke up just in time to pull her back. Our rock is shrinking, he told her. Soon it will be gone. Let's go then, Wendy cried. We can swim or fly. I can do neither, Peter replied. I have been injured. You go. But Wendy was too weak to make it on her own. The children put their hands over their eyes to shut out the sight of the rising water and prepared to meet their end. What does that mean, to meet their end? They put their hands over their eyes so they wouldn't see the water rising, and they were going to meet their end. Yeah, it means to die, unfortunately. It's a very grim expression, kind of like meet your maker, meet their end. Just then, something brushed Peter's leg. It was light as a feather and seemed to be asking, "Can I help?" What luck! It was the tail of a kite, which Michael had made a few days earlier, but then lost to the wind. Peter grabbed it and wrapped it around Wendy. Now you, Wendy cried. It can lift us both. It can't lift us both, Peter explained. Michael and Curly tried. Wendy clung to Peter, refusing to go without him, but he pushed her from the rock and away she flew. Peter was left all alone in the lagoon. The rock grew smaller and smaller. In the distance, the mermaids called sadly to the moon. Like any boy, Peter was scared to die, but soon this fear changed to excitement. To die will be an awfully big adventure, he said. Around him, the lagoon grew quieter and quieter. Peter heard the mermaids saying good night to one another and shutting the doors to their coral caves. Coral caves. That's really good alliteration. Coral caves. Good. I just want to tie back real quick. To die will be an awfully big adventure, he said. So he changed his fear to excitement. He started to think positively, didn't he? Okay, so the mermaids are going back to their coral caves, and that's really good alliteration. He heard the water gurgle greedily as it rose to nibble on the rock. Can water actually nibble on a rock? No, it just means that it keeps going higher and higher, like it's devouring, eating the rock. It's an expression. Then he saw something white floating on the water. He thought it was a piece of paper, or perhaps a piece of Michael's kite, but he continued to stare at it. He realized that it had a more definite sense of purpose than a mere piece of paper would have. It seemed to be fighting the tide instead of going with the flow. Peter found himself rooting for the white streak to win. The piece of paper was actually the Never Bird. Still sitting on her now floating nest, she was trying desperately to reach Peter. Although he had teased her in the past, he had also given orders that her nest was not to be disturbed. For this reason, and perhaps because she was above all things a mother, she would disturb her nest herself to save his life. "Swim to the nest," she called to him. "I am too tired to row all the way to you." But Peter didn't speak bird language and couldn't understand her. Then, and even near death, he could be very impatient. "What are you quacking about?" Peter asked rudely. "I don't understand a word." "Why, never," the Never Bird said, and tried again. "Same to you," Peter replied, "whatever you just said." Remembering that he was only a child, the maternal Never Bird took a deep breath and made one last push to row her nest to the rock. Upon reaching it, she flew up, leaving her eggs behind to make some room for Peter. Finally realizing her meaning, Peter waved his thank you to the Never Bird. Looking down, however, he saw there was not enough room in her nest for both him and her 2 large white eggs. He lifted the eggs up, and the Never Bird covered her eyes with her feathers, afraid of what Peter might do. On the rock next to Peter was a waterproof hat, broad and wide, which Starkey had left behind. Peter put the eggs into the hat and set them afloat. With a final happy quack, the Never Bird swooped down and settled herself on top of her eggs. Peter got into the Never Bird's old nest, waved goodbye, and pushed off. He and his nest, and Windy with her kite arrived back at the cave at nearly the same time. Oh, how everyone rejoiced! The party went on until Windy realized how late it was and told everyone it was well past their bedtimes. The boys tried to stall, insisting they were injured and needed the sling and bandages, but Windy would have none of it and sent them to bed. Go ahead and show you the picture of Peter in the Never Bird's nest, and then the hat that's Smee left behind, or Starkey left behind, and the Never Bird in the hat, and Peter in the nest, so he can float back to the cave. Well, float back to land so he can get to the cave. Okay. Awesome job, guys. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and Miss Crusoe will be reading chapter 11 tomorrow. Happy learning.